Hi everyone, Carla here from Documenting the Journey. Today I am going to be doing grid spacing. So I have grabbed several of my bullet journals, a lot of them. Like, I didn't realize I've been bullet journaling for a while, but I had a viewer ask me how I go about creating my monthly spreads. I tried to explain it in the comments with the grid spacing, counting, doing all the math. I don't think I explained it well. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over how I create my monthly spreads. Now, I usually create my monthly spreads off camera just because it does take me a little bit of brain power to figure out all of the grid spacing and the math, but I will show you 4 different bullet journals that I have that have different grid spacing, and I will explain to you how I create my monthly spreads. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I use my monthly layout the most. If you're new here, I use my monthly layout the most. So I am a huge advocate of having a really good functional monthly layout. And so I will go over how I do my spreads in addition to the notes in the columns area that I have and all of the things that I feel that are the most functional for me. So I'm going to flip the camera around and I will show you some of my old bullet journals. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the different journals that I've got here. So I've got my very first bullet journal, which was actually a Passion Planner A5. And this is the third one that I had that year because this is the last quarter. And then last year I used an A5 Zequins graph journal. I did start setting up a Odyssey notebooks for this year, and then I decided that I wanted a smaller size, and so now I am in the B6 size notebook from Sterling Ink. Okay, so each brand is going to have their own individual grid spacing. And so when you're setting up your monthly calendar, or honestly any spread at all, I always recommend that you figure out what journal you want to use, what size you want to use, and then grab a pencil. It doesn't have to be fancy, just a pencil with an eraser, because you're going to need to draw out a lot of things. You're going to need to get some ideas, and you're going to probably need to shift things quite a bit. And so basically what I do for my monthly spreads, this is the first year that I was bullet journaling, and so my evolution has changed actually quite a bit, and I'll show you the different spreads that I have on my months. If you use your monthly views as widely as I do, like everything goes in my monthly views, if you use it as much as I do, you're going to want a really big calendar. So part of bullet journaling is you're also going to need to know what you want in a spread or a calendar. If you do not use your monthly view very much, but you just need the actual days, you can just draw out a tiny calendar and use the rest of the space for notes, goals, projects, finances, anything that you want. Or you can even do a 1-page. For me personally, I know that a 2-page spread works best for me because this is the most widely used monthly view. So this, out of every single view that I have in my planner, every single layout, my month is my mostly widely used. So basically what I did is I went back here and I created a grid spacing. And so when you create a grid spacing, you have to count each individual grid vertically and horizontally. Okay. So if you want a 1-page monthly view, you know that your monthly view is just going to have to stick to this. You know, you can turn your journal this way and do your monthly view this way. You can keep it long and skinny, kind of like the Hobonichi Weeks, how they have the really long and skinny columns, or you can do what I do and you do the math. So basically what I do is I did the math because I knew that I wanted 8 full columns. I knew I wanted a full column for each individual day of the week, plus an additional column over here for notes, tasks, to-dos, goals, anything like that. If you don't utilize the space around your monthly view, you can choose to make this space much larger, and that way you can also just have monthly with no note spaces. So again, it really just depends on what you want in a monthly view. For me, I knew that I wanted the blocks big enough to where I can functionally use them, since it's the main view that I use in every planner system I have. And so what I did is I played with the spacing, and I decided that I wanted the exact same spacing on every single month. I didn't want the months to be different. So if there was only 5 weeks in a month, or if there was 4 weeks in a month, or if there was 6 weeks in a month, I knew that I wanted these blocks to be the exact same size. And so you can see even in here, like everything in my bullet journal starts with pencil, because right here I made a mistake. Okay, I numbered all of my days wrong. And so always start with a pencil. So with that, I knew that I basically just needed to take my grid spacing, which was 25 across. I knew that I wanted a 2-page spread, so I knew I had to multiply it by 2. And then I took 50 and divided it by 8, because again, I wanted 8 columns, and it was not an equal division. And so I took my pencil and I basically made dots on, you know, how many spaces I want. So I decided that I wanted 6 across and 5 high. And the reason I did that is because I could have done 6 high and everything would have been shifted down 1, but I wanted more space at the bottom for all of my notes, because like you can see in October, I put down all of my goals and everything at the bottom. I wanted more space. And again, because I wanted every single month to have the exact same grid spacing for every single block, I needed to make sure that I had enough space for those weird months that have that 6 weeks. So when you have your month starting on a Sunday, and that's the only day in the week, and then you have it ending like on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, you have those 6 weeks here. And so that's how I ended up with this particular journal, figuring out that I wanted 6 across and 5 high. Okay, now when I first started bullet journaling, I did not have the brain power or capacity or desire to actually make it look like a calendar. How do I say this? A calendar to where, you know, like this wouldn't have been there. It would have stopped here on the 30th. But now that I have kind of fine-tuned my process and it's easier for me, I can make my calendars look how I want. So this is the Passion Planner. It's an A5 bullet journal. This is the graph. They also have dot grid, but this is 5mm spacing. Now this is going to be different than another journal. So I'll show you my Zequins, which is what I used last year. Now my Zequins is also an A5. It also has graph, but this is a 4mm journal. And so you're going to have more grid spaces than you are on your Passion Planner, because the spaces are much smaller. So I did the exact same thing I did in my Passion Planner, is I went through and I counted all of my spaces high and all of my spaces horizontally, and I figured out exactly the sizes that I wanted. Again, you can see I use a lot of notes and stuff around my monthly views, and so I knew that I needed a ton of space on the sides to be able to use notes, write addresses, and, you know, write other things that I needed to do, goals, all that stuff. And so with this one, because it was a 4mm spacing, these squares are 8 by 8. And I also did the same thing I did in my Passion Planner, where I did the math to figure out if I had 6 weeks, what would it look like? Because I wanted each square on every single month to be the exact same. So every single month, regardless of how many weeks are in it, you have the same spacing, and each square is 8 by 8. And so you can see here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, and it's still 8 by 8. And then this is again 5 weeks, 5 weeks. Here's a really weird one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, and it's still 8 by 8 spacing. I have less note space here, but I still did the math to where I could make sure that this way, horizontally, I would have a column here, and vertically, if I had to have that weird 6th week, I knew that I wasn't going to run out of room on my bullet journal, and I also knew that every single month was going to have an 8 by 8 grid. Okay, and so this is the year that I finally decided to like draw the month out that you would see on a regular calendar. So instead of drawing all of your grids here and not having this, just having the empty boxes here, I just used a pencil, I drew everything, and then I just erased all of these lines. And so I've got that here. And so again, this is a A5 4mm, okay? So now we have an A5 5mm. And so this is the Odyssey notebook. This is an A5 5mm. I did the exact same thing. You can still see a lot of my pencil marking here. And basically I decided that I wanted a slightly smaller monthly view because I wanted to see if I could fit into a smaller journal. And so I counted my grid spaces with both of these. This is a 5mm grid spacing. So this is a 6 by 5. And so I have 6 spaces horizontally and 5 spaces vertically. And again, I drew out all of my months with pencil. And so this is what it looks like before. And so I have all of my pencil markings here. I have all of my dots here from every single one that I needed to put in. And then I basically drew out the outline, and then I would go in later and fill out all of the blocks for that day. Okay. And so each journal is going to have their own grid spacing. So if you just want to create a page in the back with your grid spacing, apparently I didn't do that in this one either, then it'll be easier for you to be able to determine what spaces you need. And so again, I just made sure to, oh, you know what? Another thing that I also had to play with a lot is when I create my grid spacing, I wanted to make sure that I was going to be able to fit all of one's, I don't know how to say this either. Basically, I wanted 3 days here and 4 days here, or 4 days here and 3 days here without running into the middle of the journal. And so let me see if I can show you that on here. And so my sequins was a little bit tighter. And so you can see that I had to also figure out how to shift each individual day. Like this one right here, we have 3 spaces right here because I wanted an even grid spacing to where my Thursday would end perfectly with the spine of the book. My Friday would start perfectly with the spine of the book. And so I had to do that here as well. And so you can see this actually just happens to be that it is 4 spaces, or if you're not counting this one, it's 3 spaces. So it happens to be the exact same. Let's go ahead and check my Passion Planner real quick. And so see this one, I didn't have any space here, but I still had enough space to where I had a small, like, words are really hard, y'all, to where I had 1 grid on each side here. So I could have shifted it over, but then writing my dates would have been a little bit challenging if I did this here. And so that's another thing that you need to think about when you're drawing out all of those monthly calendars is, do you want 3 days on this side and 4 days on this side, or 4 days over here and 3 days over here? I, in the past, have always had my notes space on the right. And so I always do 4 here, 3 here, and then my notes. I think I did try at one point to have my notes here and then 3 days and then 4 days. And I don't think my brain liked that. And so that is something else that you do need to consider as well on when you're drawing out your monthly calendars. And so on that note, I do remember now that what I did is I pre-counted everything, decided the size of my boxes, and then I actually started here and counted backwards. And so I started here and then I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, put a dot, 6, put a dot, 6, put a dot, because that way it didn't matter to me how much space was over here. I knew that my calendar was going to end on a perfect line for the spine. So the last journal I have to share is a B6 sized. This is the Sterling ink 520 page notebook. This is what I am in this year. Now this is a B6, which is smaller than all of my other 4 that I've just showed you. And it is also 4mm grid spacing. And so again, this one is going to have a different grid spacing than those other 3. And so what I had to do is the same process that I did with all of my others, is I counted all of my grids here, and then I counted all of my grids here. I divided the horizontal grids by 8 because again, I knew I wanted a column. And so you can see here that this one happens to be 7 by 7 for each square. And so I started again on a Thursday, counted backwards 7 squares, and then I counted forward 7 squares, and then from the top I just counted down. And so this is basically what my months look like most of the time. I just have a lot of information in here. I don't really care that this column and this column is not the same spacing. I just really like the uniform look of every single block being the exact same spacing on every single month. And so every single month I have in this bullet journal is all 7 by 7. And then of course that would mean that each space here would be the same and each space here would be the same. Now I could have definitely increased it and gone a little bit wider, but I knew that I wanted space on this side so I could write my month or put my month stickers. And so I left enough space here so I could write my month. Another downside is if I would have wanted to increase the width of my columns, that would have been an additional 4 spaces, and that would have been just to the very edge of my journal, and I wouldn't have had the space here to write my September. And so that's why I decided to take 1 space away. Instead of doing 8 across, I did 7 across because I knew I would have this space here. Okay. And so I hope that that helps. I hope that that I explained it well. And again, I can't really do this with you because when I set up my bullet journals, I just pre-draw all of my monthly layouts, and I usually do it off camera because again, I need a calculator. I don't own a traditional calculator, so I use my phone. And so I hope that helps. If you wanted to also see, I do have some here. So the Sterling Ink planner, notebook has, let me find a blank. Oh, this is so full. So this notebook actually has dots that divide your pages equally into vertical and horizontal columns. And so that was really easy for me to be able to draw a lot of my weekly layouts. And so when I decided to do a weekly layout that was 4 columns on each page, I knew where those dots were and I was able to just draw it. But if you didn't have the dots, you would do the exact same thing. You would just count horizontally, divide it by 2, and draw your line straight down the middle. Now I have done some horizontal layouts in here as well. So this one is, again, because those dots were already there, I was able to easily draw this spread. But if it was not, then I would count horizontally and divide it by 2, draw this line. I would count vertically and divide it by 2 and draw your horizontal line. Thank you. Now let's see, I have a horizontal spread in here somewhere. Here it is. And so this week I decided to do, instead of 4 vertical columns, I did 4 horizontal columns. And so again, you just count your vertical height and divide it by 2 so you know exactly where to divide your page in half. And this also goes for hourly. If you wanted a vertical week that is an hourly spread or vertical columns, you do the exact same thing you do with your monthly. Now, because I already had my monthly, I was able to easily look at my monthly to determine how wide I wanted these columns. So on this one, I didn't need as much space on the sides, and so I did 8 horizontally instead of 7 horizontally because that left me a little bit less of a space here for all of my tasks and to-dos. As far as the height, I basically just wanted to make sure that I had a full timeline for an entire day, and then I added a little bit of an extra space at the bottom for any additional notes or anything that I wanted to put in there if I wanted to just kind of write anything down there. And so all of my grid spacing is basically just trial and error. It's trying to figure out what I want my layout to look like that particular week. So this week I decided to do kind of a Hobonichi weeks type of thing here where I had all of my horizontal stuff and then I did daily pages. When I do that, I do the exact same thing. I just decide how tall I want each column. I took all of my grid spacing. I took the total number of I took the total number of grids vertically and I divided it by 8, and it wasn't even, so I knew I was going to have some leftover, and I needed to decide if that leftover was going to be on the top or if the leftover was going to be on the bottom. I decided to have the leftover on the top so I could put my week, my washi, any other decorative things. And so when I drew this layout, I actually started at the bottom. I put a dot here at the bottom and I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, put a dot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, put a dot, and I did that this way. So I knew that this space would be left over up there, okay? And so same kind of thing with this. Again, because I already had it here, I didn't have to recount it. I was able to just refer to this and create that one. And I don't think I have any other kind of unique spreads in here. I think it's all just mainly those 4. This is another vertical week. Oh, this was a fun week. I actually really liked this week. So I decided that I didn't want to have an hourly anymore, but I still wanted spaces for my time-sensitive stuff, my tasks, purchase list, habits, menu, and then I was going to use all of this space down here just as a free bullet journal type area. And so I, again, had to determine what size I wanted my boxes up here, and I basically took the grid spacing. Each grid, I counted them this way, and then I was able to divide them by 4, because again, I like having 4 days here, 3 days here, and then my notes, instead of notes here, 3 days, and then 4 days. And so it's very similar to my monthly calendar. However, my spaces are a little bit wider. And with that, I was able to start here again at the spine and count backwards. And then it was an even division here. And then I started at the spine and I counted forward. And then this was the leftover area that I had. I really like this layout. I think I might actually do that again. So yes, let's see if there's, I don't know, there might not be any other unique layouts. I don't know. Yep, that might be it, because I used a lot of daily pages in this notebook. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions, if it was not clear, or if you were confused about any point, definitely let me know. Go ahead and comment down at the bottom, or head over to Instagram and shoot me a DM, and we might be able to chat a little bit more about it there as well. And I appreciate you all watching. Thank you so much.